Welcome everyone to the State of TA 2024 report findings. My name is Jo from ATC. I'm joining you today from beautiful Malau country down on Phillip Island, and would love to pay our respects to elders past and present. And that includes all of the lands that we're dialing in from today. I can see everyone saying hello in the chat. Maybe if we want to all figure out how to use the chat and, shoot me a message and tell me, what country you're dialing in from, or if you know it, or what city you're dialing in from, and also which organisation you work for as well, so we can kind of see the spread of companies and industries joining us online today. Now, we're going to be sharing with you a report that we've worked on with our partner Paradox. We've had a lot of data, 233 talent teams that we received full data sets from leaders for that we've used for this. Of course, we did get multiple responses from many companies, but we've just taken one complete data set, so we've got an accurate representation of the data, one organisation response only. Now, we're going to be using the chat today for both questions and comments. So what I'd like you to do is, if you have a question you'd like to ask the panel, if we can kind of change up to upper caps, and whenever we see an upper caps question, we'll know you're not shouting at us. We'll know that we've got a question from the panel that we can ask. So I think now is a really good time to bring in our panel and introduce you to the people who've been reading and studying the report and the data behind the scenes, and we're going to unpack it with our panel today. So we're going to introduce you to Simon, Maisie and Ian. Simon, would you like to say good day to everyone?
Thanks, Jo. Hi, everyone. As Jo mentioned, my name is Simon. I'm a talent lead here at Mantle Group. For those of you who don't know us, we're a technology consulting firm based across Australia and New Zealand.
Wonderful. Maisie, hello.
Hi, everyone, and Yuma. I am joining you all from Ngunnawal country today. I head up the talent acquisition and workforce planning function for Downer Group across Australia and New Zealand.
Wonderful, and a very familiar face. Ian, thank you so much for partnering with us on the report again.
No, it's our pleasure, Jo, and thank you, and great to be here, everyone. So, as Jo said, Ian, I head up strategic solutions across APAC at Paradox, but prior to joining Paradox, I was the head of TA at Optus, and I spent my entire career in the talent acquisition space, mainly as a practitioner. So really looking forward to today's conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we've got so many people saying hello to us online today. Sybil, yes, we are going to share the recording, and you'll also be able to access the slides. Later this week, we'll also be releasing a much more detailed, in-depth report. This has almost been like my second child that I have delivered. This report is so big. We're only able to share with you, so many findings today. We've got many, many more data points within the report, but we've tried to pull out some ones that we thought were particularly of interest. Now let's get straight into it. We were interested to know growth or decline from a hiring intentions perspective, but also talent team size. I feel like it's not just the last year talent teams have really been on that roller coaster. It's really been the last 4 years, very up and down. But what we found was 64% of organisations plan to hire the same or more than last year. And although there has been a lot of change in TA team sizes, only 13%, and keep in mind this is back a couple of months ago now, this is March, the data was collected in April, there was only a further 13% of talent teams expecting more cuts or redundancies of any kind. We had 28% of teams looking to grow in size, and the rest were, ready and happy to stay at the current rate. Simon, you've had a role change in the last 12 months. You've experienced firsthand lots of restructures and redundancies and so forth. Is this cause for kind of a little bit of cautious optimism now with these stats?
Yeah, I think that's really well put, Jo. Cautious optimism would be very accurate. Look, I'm sure all of us would love to see that orange number, the 28%, larger than what it is. But I think it's a positive sign that close to 30% of the talent teams in our market are starting to grow, which is usually a precursor for business growth behind it. But on top of that, the 64% of organizations remaining the same or more, I think it just shows a nice sort of stabilizing of that marketplace that obviously has seen a lot of tumultuous events over the last 18 months.
And Ian, there's been a lot more, job ads up. All of a sudden, you hop online and there's a lot more roles. You're somebody that obviously talks to a lot of different talent teams within your role. What are you noticing about, the types of roles that are coming back into the market now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, in terms of the high level data is a positive trend, and it does vary between industries and organizations. But from a kind of a broader trends perspective, we're seeing a continued sort of shift towards more specialist roles in talent acquisition, growth in kind of those roles that are focusing on employer brands. So those roles that attract talent to your organization. Sort of reporting analytics continues to grow, as well as that kind of key role. I think it's the best role in TA is that sort of TA, ops or center of excellence that's going to curate those experiences across your hiring platforms. Conversely, we're seeing kind of roles in TA coordination and TA admin continue to shrink, where technology is sort of starting to take over those sort of more transactional activities in TA.
Hopefully leading us to more interesting activities though. And, I think it's a good time then to shift over into ability to deliver. So, of course, the core tenet of every talent function is deliver the right talent at the right time. So we ask people, to rate themselves for their ability to deliver over the last 12 months. And although we're seeing kind of this, the green kind of boxes there at the right end, look at the ability to deliver as a 7 out of 10 or higher. And that means that 44% of talent teams were not able to deliver the right talent at the right time for their business to win in its market. Maisie, is this on us? Is this on TA? Is this on the business? How do you see it?
Look, I wish I could blame it all on the business, but I don't think that's quite fair. But certainly in my space and in my business, we've really shifted our approach to our organizational strategy and what we're trying to achieve as a business. And that has really led to a number of changes occurring in the business, and some people choosing not to be here anymore, or some people choosing not to be part of that journey. So we've seen attrition continue to be a factor for us, and it is reducing, but that attrition that isn't monitored or expected is the piece that's catching us a lot, where we're having to be very reactive to the needs. And so that 4-week window of a notice period, usually isn't enough time to source someone, have them start, as well as having a handover period. So that's a big impact for us that we're really going to continue to struggle with until we can better connect our leaders to their workforce and help them better understand what's going on with their workforce.
Lovely. And I see a question that's come in here from Craig. We didn't see any data between centralised and decentralised, but we are, in a couple of slides coming up, there are 3 core areas that really move the dial on the ability to deliver. So stay tuned. We will be sharing what it was that moved the dial shortly. So if we have a look at state of talent advisory, this was really surprising data to me. I mean, we started talking about talent advisory, maybe 12 months ago, and all of a sudden we have 43 that already have a fully operational talent advisory service. 10 have integrated it in with workforce planning. 118 are currently developing out their service. 38 are conception planning stage. Only 24 out of the 233 are non-committal towards talent advisory. I think that is huge movement in a very short amount of time. And obviously there's big advisory, there's small advisory. When we say big advisory, we mean at that strategic level, which country, which market, which product, which service we're going to, is it going to be technology or the work of people to do this? 70% are aiming at that more tactical level, that, TABP, being able to go back and, almost do mini role redesign with their hiring manager and using a lot of market data to do that. But this really shows that we are well and truly on our way towards talent advisory. And within the report, we don't have enough time today, but within the report, we really do go into a lot of detail around how that will change the role of the recruiter. Now, 90% of organisations feel that talent advisory is the future of TA. Of course, when it comes to budget, only 24% actually had budget. Now, we did specify this non-people budget. So obviously people are putting people resources towards shifting advisory, but 24% of talent functions also had additional budget for other things. So whether that was training, development, technology, other things that help shift over to an advisory state. So Maisie, you've done this, rather amazing thing where you've actually merged workforce planning with talent acquisition, and you've also created a talent board as well. Do you want to just briefly share what the talent board is and why it was created?
Yeah, absolutely. So the talent board sits across our social infrastructure business, and it is a board that connects specifically to talk about the talent within our business. The involvement sits with our head of HR for each business that we have, as well as our senior leadership team for the social infrastructure business, so our chief operating officer and all of the general managers. And I have a role to play in this as well in terms of making sure the right conversations are being had. The purpose of it is to understand the talent that exists in our business, and it's not necessarily perfect yet because we are still forming in some ways, but being able to understand what's in each different business unit and look at it holistically as what talent exists in social infrastructure. It also plays a role in conversations around hiring, promotions, our usual performance review cycle, and generally it serves a purpose to connect us all on this really important topic around talent, the skills that we have in our workforce, and critical kind of data factors as well, such as gender. So making sure that we've got the right people involved in the right decisions, and most critically, just bringing to life a real talent focus to our business, which is a real shift for Downer Group in particular.
So this is not just a HR, TA, org dev collaboration. We're talking the chief operating officer, general managers. We're getting people to come together to collaborate and co-own the way in which talent is being acquired and developed within the organisation.
Absolutely, and that cross-contamination of talent. Excuse the word contamination, but it's probably my favourite word when it comes to describing this. The ability to determine that you have someone that has met a ceiling and they're ready for their next role, and not sit there and go, well, that's too bad, but actually be able to look across the whole business and identify, based on their skills as opposed to their job title, what is this person capable of doing next, and building those connections, building those pathways for them. I think it's really going to change how we do things here.
Yeah, and Jodie's saying she thinks the idea of a talent board is so bloody cool. Well, I'm glad you think that, Jodie, because Maisie, you have accepted our offer to come and speak on stage at ATC 2024 and share a lot of detailed insights around the talent board, and it will be more mature by then because, of course, the event is in Melbourne in October, so you'll have a little bit more time under your feet to share those outcomes and how it's working. Now, there's got to be core capabilities within your team in order to do advisory. And the three that we really wanted to ask people about were strategic thinking, business partnering, and understanding and providing market intelligence. Simon, we have a 7.2 score here for business partnering from the talent team. This is a great score. I mean, is this really the precursor? Is this the bit we're looking for to say, our people are ready for this?
Absolutely, Jo. I see it as the foundational skill to step into talent advisory, particularly for those of you who are working in smaller teams and small organizations with less spans and layers. I think, these three skills are the core tenets that we need our team members to really focus on and build up on in order to make that successful step into becoming a really strong talent advisor, where you are not just partnering with the hiring managers. I'm talking really broadly across the business, HR, RAM and band, workforce planning, your interviewer cohorts, even your office managers, and coordinate the experience that your people working day, and really getting a strong understanding and building relationships across the entire organization in which they have an impact with. Those relationships are so key. I think it came up in the chat as well. Strengthening internal partnerships and improving interoperability doesn't cost anything. And so thank you, Ivan. It's a really great point. And that's one of those core pieces to make that step. As well as, if you have the ability, as Maisie's pointed out, to build a larger...
Simon, we're getting some comments here to say, even though I can hear you clearly, we are getting some comments from the audience to say they can't hear your sound clearly. So we might jump over to have a chat with Ian, and that might rectify itself in the meantime. Ian, these are a lot of really kind of higher level business acumen skills here in terms of the capabilities required to do TA. I know what you're going to say. We're spending our time in other areas at the moment still, aren't we?
We are. And Joe, I know you and I have spoken about this many times, and we share that vision around how we kind of elevate talent acquisition to be sort of more advisory. And it's amazing to hear kind of Maisie and Simon's journey around sort of, to moving towards that. And like with myself, it's really working in that kind of understanding that talent acquisition and resourcing is finite. We need to actually kind of continue to do more with less and look at different ways around improving our processes, and importantly, technology now. And I know we're going to have a segment later on to talk about like the impact of AI, but really, I've spent my career around looking at how we can actually use TA to actually free people up to actually do higher order work. And that's really around actually enabling talent advisory, without actually taking that kind of day-to-day admin work away from recruiters and people. They're not going to actually have the capacity to focus on that higher level work.
Yeah. Now, Simon, let's check your audio, because Craig's made a point here. He's saying, I'll go out on a limb. Decentralization will support the development of talent advisory. I know you've worked in a decentralized model recently. Let's just check your audio for a moment. So maybe the good people online can send us a message to give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Yeah, hopefully that's better. I've switched to the computer audio. Fingers crossed that's clearer. Waiting to hear some positive. Excellent.
Thumbs up. Great. Lovely. Good job.
Apologies about that. Look, decentralized, to Craig's point, is spot on. The current team at Mantle Group is also decentralized. My previous teams at Salem are also decentralized, in an ability to create, a strong direct line to not only the senior leadership of the organization, but embedding each of the team members with those sort of separate domain areas to create specific focus, rather than kind of context switching and to that reactive point that Maisie mentioned. It is so essential because it allows you to, as a senior recruiter or a TA specialist or whatever the title is, to really embed yourself in that part of the business, not only with the leadership team, but with the operational teams, understanding the culture, understanding those layers beyond of a position description of what the business needs. And that is so critical.
Is the only way to achieve that decentralization though?
Not necessarily. It's probably one of the easiest ways. But I would imagine that there are other ways in which to do it. I think just decentralize is probably a quick step.
Yeah.
And one of the observations, like working with organizations that have sort of decentralized models, is one of the trends is that it tends to be kind of high volume hiring and decentralized dispersed environments. So think retail, sort of restaurants. It's those environments that kind of lead the way in decentralized model. And I think there's also a business impact there, that if you have kind of your hiring managers actually doing kind of recruitment activity that adds little value, it's taking them away from what does add value, and that's speaking with customers, training and onboarding your team. So we're just working with McDonald's today, and we're actually automating about 90 to 95% of the hiring process. So that then enables for them to actually do the task that they should be doing, which is on that adding value to customers, but also then enabling people to focus on that strategic work.
And Simon, Lauren's asking, are we referring to portfolio alignment? So this is, a decentralized model, but where you've got people embedded in different portfolios in different business units, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was the same portfolio alignment at Salem, same here at Manta Group. Call it internal operations, data, cloud, you name it. So our team sits, parallel with P&C, and we collaborate a lot. But both P&C and talent are kind of broken up and given sort of specific portfolios. We have little pods of P&C and talent, embedded in each of those domains.
Right. Well, one of the big topics of the last couple of years has been internal mobility and more recently skills. I was a little surprised, only 2% of talent teams surveyed said they had a fully automated, functioning operational internal mobility system. Only 18% said they had strong understanding of employee skills and pathways. 23% said their team is highly involved, again, 7 out of 10 or higher, in internal mobility and succession planning. So although internal mobility kind of rose up as a topic, 2.5, sort of 3 years ago, it seems to be moving a lot slower than talent advisory is. Maisie, is there a reason for that? Is it the degree of difficulty making this a beast that's unslayable?
Absolutely. I think there's a number of things that contribute to that. One is absolutely going to be tech, and the ability for people to understand that there are opportunities available to them. 2 is going to be that, well, certainly in my experience, people want to hold on to their great talent. They don't want to necessarily tell other people about it because they want to hold on to it. And so, part of the reason why we built the talent board was exactly for that, to kind of break down some of those barriers between the different businesses that we support to get a broader view. We also had, I'd also argue that there is perhaps a view from our employees around whether or not internal mobility is positive or not, or is it being seen as a lack of loyalty. So I think there's a number of things that factor in there. As an organisation, you really have to promote internal mobility and the benefits of it. And I don't think we do that well enough here. I was looking at the stats the other day, and nearly 40% of our roles are filled with internal staff. Down as internal mobility is arguably fantastic.
And it's 70% at a business like ANZ Bank. It's movers and joiners, and the movers heavily outweigh the joiners in terms of roles being filled.
Exactly. I just feel that the focus on the stories that come out of that are often about attracting people into the business, not attracting people to consider internal mobility. So part of our EVP moving forward is making sure we bring that to life.
Yeah, and look, one of the business leaders we interviewed kind of said, well, look, seated with the business, it was like, how long does somebody need to work within the business before we can shift them? The average across the business leaders was 2 years. We want someone to be here 2 years before they shift, whereas the view of the talent team was 0 days. Even if before the person has started, if you can identify them to a better aligned role, why wouldn't we allow that to happen? So I think, not much can happen until the business and talent can agree on those kind of, parameters. And part of that is obviously just maturity amongst leaders as well. So let's move now into what I like to call me work or we work. And this was a really big theme, I think, coming out of the event, was the difference between collaboration and cooperation. And a lot of the comments coming through really kind of did focus on, seeking cooperation from the business, the me work. HR are delaying the process. They're complicating the process. They insert themselves in at unnecessary points. Basically, I've got my thing I want to do. I just need that thing approved. I need to get through the red tape. in order to get what I need done, versus the we work, which is really what you've been talking around, Maisie, the true collaboration, TA, HR collaborate well together. We workshop projects, REM philosophy, internal moves, capability, everybody has ownership of it, versus I have ownership and I just need you to get out of my way, essentially. So we had a look at the relationships of the key stakeholders. So we looked at TA and human resources. And, this come up as an 8.2 out of 10. This was a lot higher than I was expecting. Maybe just the people who don't have a great relationship with HR talk about it more often than the ones that do. But maybe tell us in the chat, is this a good indication of what the collaboration and relationship between TA and HR at your business? Because I thought 8.2 was quite an impressive number. TA and the business was a 7.2. So again, this is coming back to what you were saying earlier, Simon, about, your direct connection with hiring managers and the business. But then we see a very big drop off. TA and REM and benefits are a 6.2, which I feel like is a very dangerous number for the state that we're in with the gender pay gap. And we go into a lot more detail in the report around, the people who understood their gap, a year ago versus today, after, of course, the big public release of the data, and, whether people were already working hand in hand with REM and benefits, or whether that is starting, those collaboration pieces are starting to happen now because of the data. So there's a lot more in the report around that. And TA and workforce planning, I think this is a pretty big danger signal, a 4.5 out of 10. Now, obviously not the case for you, Maisie. You've you've merged. But maybe we can come across to our audience and find out, TA and workforce planning, strongly aligned, not strongly aligned in your organisation? Do you even have workforce planning? Dan's saying the workforce planning numbers are staggering. They are staggering, but are they surprising?
That's a good question there, Joe. Interrupt slightly. Maisie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on looking at professional development for TA practitioners. What can TA start to do? What are some of your observations to equip TA leaders, TA managers to start actually kind of almost becoming that workforce practitioner as well, rather than also it being seen as a completely separate skill?
Yeah, absolutely. Give me 1 second. I've just got someone bringing my power cord because my laptop has decreased in battery very quickly. It was 100% charged, I promise.
I get great.
Thanks for giving me some time to think about that answer. No, this is an interesting one because when we look at the maturity of my function, part of our challenge is our technology is not mature. And so we're actually limited in some of the things we can or can't do. So for me to sit here and say that, everyone is trained and has the ability to be trained and everyone can understand what we're doing, and, we can do robust data analytics and teach people how to do that. We're on that journey, but we're not 100% there yet. What I have found is most people value the opportunity to be involved, whether it is observing or being part of the conversation or actually doing the work. And so we are taking it one step at a time. The connection of my business unit between TA and workforce planning was done last year as part of a restructure. And, that immediate 6 months is really looking at how do you bring the team together. And anyone familiar with Downer will know we've had a few restructures in our time, certainly in my time here. And so there's always some adaptation that's required. But I guess my simplest answer is we just get people involved. We get people understanding what we're trying to do. And then there's a lot of formal training that can go on in the background to support that as well. But for most of the stuff, it's on the job and helping people understand why we're doing what we're doing.
Well, I think the two big strategic plays here got is merging talent acquisition with workforce planning and the development of that talent board. So I feel like, 12 months time, I can't wait to hear, how that's actually, helped the organisation, like what, outcomes are of this. And, what a more interesting place to be, as somebody who needs to live their entire career within talent as well, to continue to develop this out and to be more strategic and have more strategic value to the organisation. Let's move into, some of the comments that we had from the people who completed the survey. So TA and HR, they said, we have worked for 3 years to build relationships. We are one team. They help us every step of the way. So you can see that was a real 3-year effort and journey for this organisation. TA and the business, the first thing I did was travel and spend time out on location with centre managers to build trust, understand their unique challenges and what they needed from the talent team. TA and Rem and benefits, we saw this quote earlier, we collaborate together, we workshop projects such as Rem philosophy, internal moves, capability framework. And with workforce planning, TA is involved in strategic workforce planning, discover and design sessions, org design sessions, as well as impact and redundancy preparations. This allows us to prioritise the right work. So it is great to hear, these connections and collaborations are really, happening in such a positive way in so many talent teams. So let's shift now into coming back to your question earlier, Craig. Some of the things that had impact. No, it wasn't centralised or decentralised. The 3 things that really moved the dial. We asked people, to rate on a scale of 0 to 10 how much your HRD truly understands talent acquisition. And we found that was actually had a direct correlation with those performance outcomes around delivery. The other one was strategy alignment. The people who had a stronger alignment between their talent strategy and the organisational strategy were also delivering at a much higher and easier level. And no surprises, funding was the third one. And we saw those ones really jump and shift for the 3 that had these right. So let's have a look now. HRD support, to what extent does your HRD really understand talent? So this was also heartening to see as well, because my time internally within a HR team, this was certainly not the case. So maybe I was just had, my kind of fuzzy glasses on based on my own internal experiences, but this was super heartening to see. So 60% of talent teams scored the HRD as a 7 out of 10 or higher. And then for this group, the effectiveness of their talent strategy was also rated as 6.1 out of 10 compared to a 4.4 for those who had a HRD lower. So it wasn't only delivery that shifted, it was the effectiveness of the overall talent strategy. Dan truly understands or think they understand. Well, these were largely the heads of talent answering it. So it was from, I guess, your perspective, you saying, I believe my HRD truly understands talent. It wasn't HRDs self-rating themselves and giving them a pat on the back. All right, so let's jump now to funding. To what extent does your talent function have sufficient funding? And we can see here the ability to deliver. It goes from a 6.4 out of 10, severely underfunded, to a 7.4 out of 10 for those with abundant funding. So, the higher the funding, the better the delivery. Simon, have you always worked in highly funded teams?
Not at all.
Sorry, I knew the answer to that one.
No, but I think, looking at this slide, I actually feel it's a sign that even those teams that are severely underfunded, somewhat underfunded, are still able to perform at a above average level, which I think is to be commended. I spoke earlier about doing more with less, but I think that's time to sort of let's make a shift and let's start building strong relationships with our HR directors or head of P&C, whoever that person is, and start really starting with a positive relationship and then educating them on the importance and the connection of what talent does and its strategic importance to the growth of the organization. Because, it's time that we really start shifting the dial on this. I hope that in 2 or 3 years' time, when we're doing the session again, that we're not looking at the same set of data. I really do.
Absolutely.
Your thoughts, Simon and Maisie, is like, I've traditionally talent acquisition has been seen as a cost center.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of look at it from the lens of actually being a revenue driver for the organization and speaking the language of the business around how you can actually add like business value and business impact. I'd love to get your thoughts around, where you've seen that be successful, any strategies that you've used to kind of have that conversation with your HRDs and business leads.
I'm in the somewhat underfunded category, so a harder question to answer for me. But I think, in terms of how I think the business perceives us, we're on a journey to change that. The prior capability that existed in this kind of space was very much a put an ad up and someone will apply. And I think that still resonates with some of our stakeholders and perhaps those, proactively involved in the finance spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
What we're working really hard to do is to demonstrate the value we bring. And as we're doing that, we are seeing that there is a stronger investment in our function, both from involving us in conversations, through that talent board, for example, but also seeing where the value is. My challenge is, we just have to continue to demonstrate it every day, and that can be quite tiring. I'm sure there's plenty of TA leaders on this chat who are having kind of the same thoughts right now. But I am seeing it shift, but I think it is one of those things where you have to really work hard for the business to understand what you bring in some cases and why there is a need for that funding to exist.
And Ian, this is really about cost or investment, right? So, is the spend you're looking for an investment, and can it deliver you an ROI? And I know they're things that you talk about often.
It is, and like that kind of generally falls into a couple of different buckets. But in terms of the language that you speak, it changes dependent on the audience. HRD will have different questions versus finance and versus your business leaders. So it's really understanding their drivers and speaking to that. Like when we talk about hard savings, it's really around looking at your tech stack, replacing legacy tech, consolidating your vendors, looking at operational efficiencies and efficiencies. Like, for example, if you drive higher conversion with reducing friction in your hiring process, you don't have to spend so much money on advertising. Or, we'll talk about interview scheduling in a moment, but, automating some of these simple tasks, can really add huge benefit for the team.
Well, I think that is a good time to lead into what is the current state of AI in TA. So, we've used an external report here to quote Qualtrics research. 47% of Australian professionals admitted that their workday was spent on tasks that don't significantly contribute to their core job functions. A figure well above the global average of 41%. I think we're at a point in time now where in our everyday life, we are using AI. I've used ChatGPT to help me write a eulogy, help me write a birthday message, a love poem, all sorts of things. And within our own life, we're using this, really on the reg. And it just reminds me, for those of you who are in recruiting long enough, back in the day when, iPhones first became a thing. And at the time I was carrying around BlackBerries. But in my personal life, I carried around an iPhone, and the BlackBerry was just the greatest source of frustration for me, because in my everyday life, things were just easy, simple, and they worked, and it was a really nice experience. And every time I needed to get on that bloody BlackBerry, it was, and I'm just like, it's the same price, why? And now all of a sudden, of course, businesses hand out iPhones as the norm. So I feel like we're now at this point where in our everyday life, we're using technology that we enjoy, that works for us, but in a business context, we're still coming to work and we're finding things a bit clunky and a bit frustrating. So, we asked 49.8% of respondents reported using some sort of AI in their talent function. So, it's near on 50%. But 50% don't. And that kind of surprises me for the variety of different AI that's out there. And we asked people about all of it. We asked about just using Gen AI in writing, ads and descriptions, sourcing tools, interview scheduling tools. I thought 50% was pretty low, to be fair. But when I asked about what people were investigating, all of a sudden these numbers shot up. So I feel like we're on this real precipice of change here. And, does this surprise you, Ian? By far, people are investigating AI interview scheduling as the top AI item.
No, not at all. Like, I think in sort of taking a step back, it's like the time of AI, is here today, and it's going to be continue to shape the sort of future of talent acquisition. But kind of sharing about your view, Joe, and showing my age here, when I started out in recruitment close to 20 years ago, I feel like AI is actually taking us back to that point where it's actually enabling, recruiters to actually spend time speaking with people and, hiring managers as well. So it's actually augmenting, recruiters to do what they do best. And that's actually building sort of trust and convincing people to join those organizations. I think we'll start to see a trend of, roles like I spoke to, those specialist roles that are actually going to curate experiences and really drive the type of change and investment in AI technology that we're seeing on the screen here. But, when I work with organizations around kind of their journey of sort of, looking at tech, interview scheduling is actually where most organizations start in terms of looking at automation. I think going back to kind of answering funding question, it's very easy and clear ROI on interview scheduling. There's typically a human being doing that activity today. It's measurable in terms of kind of time and then cost on the business. And then you can either repurpose that headcount to higher value added tasks as well. And and just talking about data, because I love to kind of support this with data as well. Like for instance, General Motors in the US took their time to schedule interviews from 5 days to about 20 to 29 minutes. Like Optus, closer to home, took that from about 3 days to about just over 2 hours, with the fastest being just over 10 seconds. So, and that has a real impact on reducing your time to recruit, but also making sure that you're not losing, your high quality candidates, with delays getting back to them.
Yeah. And I think, in terms of pitching the business case for this sort of stuff, like the time to hire, candidate velocity, like these are all stats that TA leaders are particularly wedded to. Although I would like to think we're probably, hopefully starting to measure direct impact on the business versus, just measuring ourselves. But that seems to be a stat that everyone is very, very wedded to. And can you just repeat that? They took the interview scheduling from how many days down to, was it 29 minutes?
Yes, so General Motors, 5 days to 29 minutes, and they repurposed 50 TA coordinators from doing that task to different work.
You're shaving 5 days off time to hire. That's...
Yeah, and we've spoken, Joe, before, like, no, I've never spoken to a recruiter that loves scheduling and rescheduling interviews. It's something that no one really enjoys doing. And like with technology today, you can automate that today.
Oh, can you imagine, sitting here in a few years' time saying, oh, I really miss the old days where, you email backwards and forwards for 5 days trying to figure out a time that, works for everyone, said no one. This is just such a no-brainer. Now moving into the next area, what is holding us back from using AI? So we wanted to get a sense, 5 days down to 29 minutes. Yeah, amazing. So what's holding everyone back? Number one, data privacy and security concerns. Number two, integration with existing HR systems. Number three, cost. I feel like they are general concerns with any technology, not necessarily, AI specifically. Sorry, I've gone too far. So if we just come back to data privacy and security concerns, Ian, what are some of the questions we need to be asked when we're looking at implementing this kind of technology?
Yeah, and like you shared, Joe, I was actually really surprised with the top 3 on that list when I start speaking about AI specifically, because it really applies to any technology you're looking to implement. Prior to AI becoming so dominant in your tech stack and the conversation. Working with organizations and kind of advice and guidance to TA leaders is really around to focus your time on understanding the impact that it's going to have on your function, the value that it's going to deliver, and the ROI that it's going to have to deliver to your organization. But when you're actually speaking with vendors, like Paradox, engage the experts within your organizations early. Get IT in that a very early conversation to actually then help them evaluate from a deep domain and sort of expertise level as well as working with organizations and providers that are kind of reputable. They've been in the market for a long time, and they've got the right accreditation. So for data and privacy, that's SOC 2 Type 2 or ISO 2001 or 27001, for instance.
Beautiful. And, we're seeing here, although, yes, integration's obviously really important, cost is always a factor. But, I think, what we talked about earlier was that kind of removal of the general administrators. I remember you talking to me about one team that had so many kind of coordinators and administrators. There weren't people who were actually recruiting. They weren't recruiters. They were essentially just admin people. And salary is the largest expense for any business anywhere. Like your bricks and mortar building comes a very far second to salary. So we should really be looking at, obviously, how we spend that and how we can do better. If I look back through the comments, so Toby was saying 4 and 5 were bigger concerns for him: potential for algorithmic bias and lack of human touch. Do you want to talk to those factors?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one around going to bias, and I actually anticipated around kind of bias and lack of human touch to be higher up on this list. So that was an interesting observation as some of the outputs of this report, and it's kind of conversations that I day in, day out. In terms of bias, there's some distinctions to make there, sort of when looking at this technology in the market. And that's really around kind of the differences between looking at AI solutions that kind of automate kind of binary or fact-based tasks. So, we spoke about interview scheduling. The other one is really around screening for minimum criteria. I remember that I started my career doing high volume recruitment and having the same conversations with 20 or 30 candidates a day, asking them the same 5 questions. Is that going to add value? If you can automate those and making sure that you're going to be asking, those questions in a really concise and consistent manner, I would actually argue that's actually removing human bias, from the process. The other one, sorry, Joe, I was just going to say, there's the other bucket of AI solutions out there that do use algorithms to kind of make or assist hiring decisions. And that's kind of, I would actually treat them very distinctly different when looking at vendors in the market and having this conversation internally.
Yeah, and look, I think, we're just going to have to get used to how to properly kind of, interrogate what we need and bringing the right people into the conversation to, alleviate these concerns. I mean, coming back to the other panelists, Maisie and Simon, between what hours are your business talking to candidates? Do you have a bot talking to candidates 24/7, or do you have consultants talking to them Monday to Friday, 9 to 5?
It's very much the latter for us. We're in the process of a major kind of capability uplift. So this is on our roadmap, but it's way down.
Maisie?
I'm the same as Simon, although my team doesn't do 9 to 5. No, they are definitely working a bit more than that. I'm sure they'd like to, and I would like them to, absolutely. But some organisations like our own have, deep connections into the Australian Defence Force and the work that we do in that space, and that really actually limits us quite significantly around the things we can and can't do, and our risk. A view around risk on some of those things. So like Simon, it's on the roadmap, but it is definitely not the priority right now.
And I saw an earlier comment from Tim to say, at RMIT, he works in a very kind of risk adverse environment and still manage to be able to kind of, achieve this. So it's possible, when we look at, which department may it be suitable for and which people do we need to bring in on the conversation. Ian, what kind of hours are some of your customers, whether it be, McDonald's or Optus, etc., Deloitte, what time of the day and which days are the majority of the conversations happening?
Yeah, it's a really interesting observation. Like, for instance, we're working with Uniting Care Queensland. We see like a lot of the candidates, they're actually engaging in a career conversation with them around 2 and 3 a.m. in the morning. Certainly in their aged care environment, that people on shift work, that's not traditionally when TA teams are working between 9 and 5. So actually having an assistant there to actually engage, answer questions, and actually screen them and move them forward in the hiring process to speak with a human at a time that works for them is actually really in enabling those individuals. It's similar kind of story at Optus as well, where like we've saved about 5,000 recruiter hours by automating kind of those back and forward Q&A and interview scheduling. So it's having a significant impact. So I've always argued that technology used in the right way actually adds a much more of a human touch. It augments and actually provides a much better experience.
Yeah. Huimin's just popped a great link in there, and Dan's also making some comments online because I know some people are chatting about the Workday case in the US at the moment. So I love how much the chat is going off. Let's shift over into today's TA leader. We're nearing the end of our session today, and we thought it might be good to have a look at, obviously, strong leadership is needed at the top. How are people feeling? We're seeing quite good engagement to the core mission, a 7.7 out of 10. The majority of talent leaders are highly engaged with their core mission. It's a little concerning, obviously, for the others. We don't always find ourselves in the right environment with the right enablers. How often can talent leaders work from home? And, we're seeing some people can still work 100% remotely. Others, 1, 2 or 3 days in the office. It's very few people who are needing to be in the office 4 or 5 days a week, which is, I'd say keep up the great work, power to the people. And we need to, keep up that flexibility that we all gained out of COVID. 89% of respondents, enjoying that great flexibility. So we'll get some final comments before we kind of talk about the larger report in general. Do we have any questions from the audience before we wrap up today? Anything that we haven't covered that you think our panel may be able to shed some light on? Take a little bit of time to pop that in there. So while we're waiting for some comments to pop in there, maybe we'll pop around to the panel for any kind of final wrap-up comments. Simon, do you want to go first?
Thanks, Joe. Look, I think the final comments from me is that overall there's some really positive takeaways. I think obviously there's a lot more in the full report, so I encourage everyone to have a deeper dive. But I think across the board, we've been through the ringer in talent over the last 12 to 18 months. I think anybody who's been paying attention could attest to that. And I think there are some positive signs here that we're on the way out. There's some really cool technology, to start exploring, start looking at. There's some really great developments in how we structure and run our teams, no matter what the business size is, and how we represent ourselves internally. And I think they're starting to see a bit of a step change in the way that the industry sees us and the value we provide. So let's just keep supporting each other, keep collaborating, and keep moving the dial.
And look, I think collaboration is a really big word coming out of this report. Maisie, would you agree? This is really where everything is aimed for Downer.
Absolutely. And, going through this report, I'm really not surprised with where things are at, but I am looking at those organisations and those people who are, more closely connected and going, how can we replicate that? I think it is for any TA leader, the focus for us is not just on, bringing someone into a business. It's the whole picture. It's the EVP, it's the experience, it is the quality of the hire, there's so many different factors, and I just think that this report's been really pointed for me in terms of where we're at right now. Absolutely, I think you nailed it in your description. We're in this really pivotal point where we're going to see a lot change over the next few years, and I can't wait to be part of it. But I also really hope that we can continue to share our insights and all work together as a as a function and as an industry to keep this up and keep the momentum for everyone.
Absolutely. And I think, there's a lot of benchmark data in there where it's great even just to look at that and kind of self-assess and think about, well, where are we, even if you didn't fill out the survey, like where are we compared to where everyone was at? And if you need some help and support to build the business case for talent advisory, being able to go in with those figures and say, everyone is on the move. Like we are going to be the odd function out, if we're not also looking at investing in this. And I think it's also, true that people risks are business risks. And the more that we can align ourselves to the organizational strategy and organizational goal and, get the executive leadership team to really understand that we are a real driver of success is where we've got to go. Ian, thank you so much. You guys have done so much hard work helping us, prepare for this report. Any final parting words?
I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Maisie and Simon for joining the panel and sharing your insights. So thank you so much. And also thank you to you, Joe, and partnering with the ATC. Always a pleasure to do that with yourselves. And also really optimistic around kind of the opportunity we have in our space and making sure TA elevate what we do and that be a real differentiator and competitive advantage for your organisation.
Oh, yeah, look, so agree. And you can see all of the other topics here that we've got in here that we weren't even able to get close to today. We've got great data in there around candidate experience, around the gender pay gap, the rise of candidate fraud. There's some juicy examples and quotes in there on candidate fraud. Let me tell you, I feel like we could almost do a part 2 to delve into some of this. But I'd like to say thank you to everyone, for your help and support on this today, panelists, and thank you to everyone for such lively chat. I've absolutely loved reading it. Ivan, part 2, watch this space, you never know. All right, lovely. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We'll chat soon and we'll get this recording out to you. We'll get the link to download the deck out to you, but later this week, keep an eye on your inbox. You will get the full report by the end of the week. All righty, ciao for now.